Hi there, welcome to Take a Hike. We've done our 5 tips for wild camping. Everybody's doing 5 tips for beginners, but we've went slightly outside the box and just done 5 tips for everybody. We genuinely believe it doesn't matter how many trips you've done or what experience you have, every day's a school day. No matter who you are and what you've done, every time you're up the hills you learn something new because everything doesn't always go to plan. The reason I'm doing these 5 tips is because I'm relying on my experience in the army when I've been to Falklands, Afghan and other places, and me and Ali have just got back into camping during lockdown 1, so we're just starting to get back into it again and find our love of the outdoors. So that's the reason why we've done our 5 tips. Hopefully you've learned something out. Some people might learn all 5, some people might just learn 1 or 2, but we just thought we'd give it a go and hopefully some people learn something from it. So hopefully you enjoy. Hi everybody, welcome back. So I've decided to do these 5 tips because it seems to be circling around YouTube. I'm finding when I'm watching these videos a lot of the tips are becoming very similar, so I wanted to go kind of off topic and give you 5 tips that I don't think anybody's shared yet or is new to people. So my number 1 tip would be to always take a windproof lighter with you. Not only that, when you take a windproof lighter, get some sort of tape, whatever tape it may be, grey tape, whatever, and wrap the tape around the lighter. It doesn't take up any weight, it doesn't take up any space, it's just to double up the tape with a windproof lighter. So firstly, the windproof lighters, obviously if your sparker or your igniter fails, you'll still manage to light it, light your gas with your windproof lighter. And secondly, if your gas fails or your stove fails, you'll still manage to start a fire if you don't take a starter kit for starting up a fire. So I think it's a valuable bit of kit. I've seen a lot of the time when people struggle to light their stuff when it's windy, but a windproof lighter's not going to go out at all. So I've used it many a time and it's came in very handy. The tape as well, it can patch up, I don't know if you drag your jacket, you can patch up a hole, get a hole in your tent, you can patch up the tent. And I've even seen myself where my feet have been in a really bad condition, I've used tape to tape up my feet, so it does come in handy for that. So that's your tip number 1. Tip number 2, always take newspaper. It might sound absolutely random and it might sound, what do you need newspaper for? There'll be many occasions where a lot of people have had wet boots. So when you do have wet boots, we've got camping shoes, so we get into our camping shoes when we get to our tent. Your newspaper, take a page out, scrumple it up, put it in the toes of your boots. Next page out, scrumple it up, put it in your boots. You maybe need 4 or 5 bits of paper, and then that way, come the morning, your boots will be dry. I've tried it, I've tested it, it works. Same again, back to your windproof lighter. If your stove fails or you're in an emergency situation where you're in a summit or stuff like that, then you will manage to use your windproof lighter, doubled up with your newspaper, to create a fire and get your fire started. There's too many occasions where I've seen people's videos and they've struggled to get their fire started. You've got your newspaper there to dry out your boots if that does arise, and your newspaper doesn't take up any room or any weight, so it's a very top tip in my eyes. It does work and it will save your boots from being soaking, and then the next day I've seen me do it myself a long time back, when you put like your old socks in from that day to try and get the water moisture wicked out of them. It doesn't really work that well. So newspaper doesn't take up any room. You will get a free one from Metro, or you can spend 25p, 30p and you've got a big batch of newspaper that can flat pack in your bag or even at the bottom of your bag. Just same again for an emergency. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3, take 2 dry bags with you extra. You might think, why do I need to take 2 dry bags extra? The first one is for your rubbish. What we found is if you put your rubbish inside the dry bag, it can always be scrunched down, rolled up and clipped. Another extra to that is if you might not have room in your pack once all your rubbish is in, you just clip your dry bag to the outside of your pack, and then it gives you the solution there for the recycling element where you're managing to reuse a dry bag. You just wash it out and dry it out, it works perfectly fine. So we just use an old dry bag and that's what we're doing. Secondly, if the weather is really bad up the top of summits, or the weather is just really bad in general with the rain and it's absolutely miserable outside, all we would do is pack all the kit inside the tent, put our bags into one of our porches, and we just start unclipping our inner tent. The inner tent goes into the dry bag, and the outer tent, when we get outside, will just go into the spare dry bag, which will be used for the wet outer of our tent. So that's a top tip. Same again, a lot of tents are inner tent pitch first, but there's a lot of tents where you can just collapse the inner when you're inside it, and then that way you just need to get out, undo all your pegs, and then collapse your outer, and then put it into a bag. It just saves your inner tent. More so if you're doing West Highland Way or multi-day through hikes, you're going to need to look after your kit big style, because if you don't look after it, it's just going to fail. So that's tip number 3. Tip number 4. Take some rope or paracord or stuff like that, string. Personal experience, I've had my bootlaces snap on before, so you can repair your bootlaces. Also, if you're using your guy ropes to tension out your tent, if one of them snaps or snags, you could replace it because you've got that with you. Also, inside your tent, if you've not got like a washing line or that attached to the inside of your tent, which a lot of them don't, you could just make a makeshift one for drying out clothes or anything like that. So it's a multi-purpose thing, i.e. like I said, string or anything like that, you could use it for multi-purposes. So that's tip number 4. Tip number 5, try and have a reference point. And what I mean by that is, even though you set up your tent, everything might be sunny like it is today, but more often than not, if you are doing summit camps or you are quite high up, you can get clogged into the clouds quite easily. The weather could be changed in the morning, it could be very rainy, it could be very cloudy. So what we always tend to do is, i.e. put a guide rope, a guy line in a certain direction, so that way you've got a bearing point. Or set your map and your compass up the night before, so you've got a bearing point to march on. It's not unlikely, probably, but in some cases it can happen, and that way if you've got a bearing point on your compass, or you've got some sort of marker or a rock or that, so you know when you collapse your tent, you're walking in that direction because you've set it up the night before. That way, obviously we use View Ranger and everything like that, but how many times has people's phones went dead or stuff like that? You just got to look at the worst case scenarios. At least if you've got a bearing point on a compass or a reference point, once you've collapsed your tent, you know the direction of travel for the next morning. So that's tip number 5. That's my 5 tips. Hopefully you've enjoyed them and learned something from them. Up next, I'll be comparing the Trekology UL80 mat against the Thermarest X Ferrum. If you've liked this video, please like and subscribe. Thanks a lot for watching. We've been Take a Hike.